Welcome to Tail Learn Code. Here there will be tales about software development, learning from each other, code to build solutions. And now your host, Chad Green.
All right. All right, so are you set now, or are you still fooling with audio?
No, I'm good now.
All right,
I
let me...
figured out where the little button was for the whole, because it was trying to make my screen is the TV, so it has speakers, so it's trying to make it go through the TV, which is like, no, let me create all the echo in the world. This is a great idea.
It's one of the problems I find, because, between Skype, Teams, Zoom, broadcasting, it's like everything decides it wants to use a different audio settings.
And the controls are never in the same spot.
No, exactly. And for some reason, now luckily, Teams is getting better about this, but Teams sometimes has a tendency to change the settings on its own. Yes. And I'm like, why did you do that?
I found a pattern on mine. It's every time I reboot my computer, or anytime it runs an upgrade. So those are the two, like
I said, I've not, because I've rebooted several times in the last couple of days and I haven't had problems, but now I say that, I'm probably going to Teams call later on in the day, and I bet you it'll be screwed up again. All right, so welcome. It's great to have you. I've been talking you up about how you're the accessibility queen.
Yeah, I saw those.
Well, of course, the whole joke is Martine every year she's like, well, I'm gonna submit. I don't know if you're gonna pick anything. I'm like, you're one of the few people who actually submits accessibility talks. So guess what? You're basically an automatic in, all right? Because
yep.
Because it is such an important topic. But I gotta admit, even when you want to do the right stuff, half the time we don't know what we're doing anyways. But let's talk. I mean, let's quickly talk about you first. Give us the quick elevator pitch of who Martine Dowden is.
Well, that's a loaded question. Which, by the way, we can see your entire screen, including your cheat notes.
No, you see. Oh, okay. Well, I am showing my wrong. I'm showing you my wrong screen.
No, so who I am, well, I started, we'll just go with the career stuff. That's an easy, I actually started in art and design. I have a psychology background, not in tech. I did a psychology degree and couldn't find a job, so kind of fell into tech and started doing some UI stuff and kind of went downhill from there. Learned JavaScript, and then the accessibility, obviously, since front end work, and kind of continued on from there.
Mm-hmm. So I was going to go somewhere and I forgot where I was going to go, but no, that's cool. It's I've been talking to several folks. It's interesting to see the different paths people take into technology. All right. Some did the quote unquote traditional path, went to school for it and always knew that's what they were going to do. Others like yourself, I'm hearing that more and more people who they went down a different path and realized it wasn't the right way, either because they couldn't find work in it, or wasn't the right passion.
Yeah, I couldn't find work inside, but I also very quickly realized it wasn't the right passion either. As much as I was very interested in the inner workings of the neurology and how people process and understand, I wasn't exactly people oriented enough in terms of the how does that make you feel part of life to really handle the psychology world really.
But I wonder, I bet that helped. Again, we talked about, you're so keen on accessibility. I bet that helps having a psychology degree, because you have an understanding how people think about things.
Oh yeah, it does help a lot. And even in just basic writing UX and doing UX research and having that background is really, really helpful. I've used probably at least 50% of what I learned like in, my traditional schooling has been relevant to my work, which is probably a lot more than most people can say about what their degrees actually impact what they're doing today.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I was fooling with audio controls. Your audio was actually not coming through loud enough, but I think I got that better. Well, I fooled with it on my side, so it should be coming in better now. But no, cool. So yeah, no, that's definitely an interesting thought about all that. It's I mean, what do you find as far as what are your challenges that you have within technology in doing what you do?
Especially early on, not having had the traditional schooling, some of the vocabulary is very, very distinct to our industry. So a notable story is I'd been coding some JavaScript for a while and I was struggling with something. So I asked I asked one of my coworkers for some help and he's like, well, just do an array. And I'm like, well, what the hell is an array? And he started making fun of me. And it was like, I'd been using arrays for quite some time. I just call it the thingy in the squarey brackets.
Right.
Right. So those, and that's a pretty pointed example, but little things like that in which like a lot like you may know what you're doing without maybe knowing how to talk about it or how to talk about it with other people, which I think can be a barrier to not only people knowing that you have the skill to do it because you can't talk about it intelligently or what people perceive as intelligently, and it also makes it seem like you know a lot less than what you do.
Yeah.
So those can be a little bit challenging. The other part is if you don't have a CS background, like I know my field very, very well. If you were to ask me to build my own computer tomorrow, I would be doomed, right? I don't know. I don't quite have any of the backgrounds in terms of the inner workings of. But again, it's so the industry is so broad that I feel like there's probably entire areas that other people don't know. So it doesn't keep me from sleeping at night.
Oh yeah. But you talk about challenges, so I think that is sometimes a problem. What you're talking about there, a problem in our industry, that there is a one-upsmanship. It's what do you mean you don't know what an array is? How can you not know that, right? Or I mean, I've got a point. I used to build my own computers. I don't do that anymore because I don't want to, right? And really it comes down to time and value, right? It's the time it takes me to build a PC. It's not really worth the value. And I still end up making several changes to my new machine, but I don't even think I enjoyed that part. But at the same rate, I know I talked to some people. Well, what do you mean you didn't build your own machine? Why didn't you build your own machine? I'm like, well, why would I, right? It's.
And now, don't get me wrong. I'm totally a tinkerer. I'm looking to see if it's on my desk somewhere. I think it is, but I can't find it at the moment. But like, I totally made the whole do-it-yourself Google Home. That's the cardboard box with the button. I think it's around here somewhere. Oh yeah, there it is. There it is. Like I totally, and that was fun, but it's also like I don't depend on this to do my day in and day out work.
Right.
If I'm, so it was like it was fun because it was playing. I wouldn't ever want that to have to like I would never want that kind of experimentation to be happening on my main rig. Like that would not be cool.
Oh yeah, no, it's I feel that exactly. I mean that's I mean even the tinkering I did on my machine, every time I have a problem, like, oh, did I screw that up? Right? It's actually I ended up who I bought the machine through. I will never recommend because they did screw up several things. That's a long story. To include, they missold the computer.
Ooh, that's not good.
Well, so sure enough, it said, you had a USB-C port. So I'm like, oh, cool. That's, getting more and more used. And sure enough, the video switcher I'm using, that's what it uses, a USB-C connection. And so I go to connect it and nothing, right? And of course, I didn't think it was the port, right? So I'm trying it on different machines. I'm like, oh, that's working just fine here. And And then so I'm like, well, I wonder, you know, I mean, sometimes, you know, when computers get shipped, sometimes cables get loose, right? So I'm tracing the cable, and there's a cable that's leading to nothing, right? Well, it definitely got loose, but then I'm looking at the cable. I have no idea where this thing's supposed to plug into. And so at that point, I opened up a trouble ticket with them. And they're like, oh, yeah, now your motherboard doesn't support USB-C. And I'm like, so you sold, and I grant you could change the configurations. I'm like, why didn't you tell me that, right? It's like, well, not all motherboards support that. I'm like, well, no one is like the top line motherboard that you sold for that machine. So assumption could be that it would have a USB-C. But number two, I should have got a warning, right? You know, like, no.
Yep.
And I'm like, yeah. So it's between that and the fact that they configured my hard drives wrong. They so I upgraded to the best SSD, you know, M2 SSD you could get. It was super fast and everything. But as I was building the machine, it was like a regular hard drive was like $35 extra. I was like, oh, why not? I don't really need it, right? Because I bought a 2 terabyte SSD. I'm like, I don't really need another 2 terabyte drive, but sure, why not? All right.
I probably do.
Well, actually, the more I would say, the more video work I'm doing, because I'm doing more and more video work. Yeah, I'm getting ready to put some stuff in cloud storage because I want to keep it, but I don't necessarily keep it on my machine. But you know, I get the machine, I don't even realize anything's wrong. You know, I start installing stuff, and then one day, also everything's going slow, and I'm looking at Task Manager, and my disk just, you know, pinged. I'm like, why is my disk being pinged? But then as I dug through, they put the system on that regular hard drive instead of the SSD. I'm like, why did you do that? What logic would say, you know, when I buy the best SSD you have, you would put the operating system, you know, the C drive on the, you know, on the slow hard drive. But
that's weird.
And you know, and I didn't say anything about that when I first found out, because I can make that fix eventually whenever I get around to it. I did when I complained about the USB-C, I had that on there, and they didn't even respond to that issue. I'm like, all right, whatever. So long story short, don't buy computers from Cyber Power PC. That's really what it boils down to.
I didn't even I just went for the I did the good old, oh, here's a Mac refurb. It's a great price. Yup. So bought the Mac refurb right off the shelf.
Yeah, well, so it's easier to do when you're doing Macs, right? Because Macs.
Yep.
I mean, honestly, there are only so many choices, right?
There really aren't. No.
And it really does boil down to how much money do you have, right?
Yep.
As to how much of a machine you're going to get. Yep. Whereas obviously with the PC, there's a whole lot more choices, and I wanted something very powerful, which is why I went with someone like CyberPower, because I was like, okay, I can specify what I want, and I got what I wanted. And sure enough, again, going back to why I didn't build a PC, because I did think about it this time around, but I got the liquid cool with the hard tubing, and I was not about to do that. I'm like, no, I will screw that up, and I don't need water all over my motherboard.
Gee, I wonder why.
Yeah, no, I'll let someone who does that, you know, on a routine basis do that piece of it.
Oh. Yeah, no, I went with Mac because it was, especially when I bought this, it's been a couple years now, and it was like I wanted to be able to have a legit command line and be able to run Adobe.
Mm-hmm.
And so my options for a legit command line were Linux or Mac, and Adobe was going to be Windows or Mac. So easy Venn diagram to have running at that point. So of
course, now you can do all that on Windows.
I know, but I haven't used a Windows machine in so freaking long.
Yeah,
it's almost scary now.
I don't really get into the whole what's better. I mean, it's whatever better for you. Windows is definitely better for me because I'm used to Windows, right? It's
yep.
I tried doing a Mac. That just did not work for me. It probably worked better now. Now that Visual Studio for Mac works a whole lot better. But didn't work.
Yeah, I also don't do back end work though. So like
Yeah.
for me, it's always been like, it was I'm trying to think of, I don't even remember what my first editor was, but it's like it was Atom, now it's Visual Studio Code, and
Hmm.
and so on and so forth. So it's just I've never had to worry about Visual Studio per se. Although I did fight getting onto Visual Studio Code because I mean, it's a great product, but their name is garbage. It's like, why did you? It's not the same. Like I thought it was just like
See,
the
that's the
open source
non-Microsoft
Visual.
developer saying that, right?
I know, right? So it took me losing a bet where the bet was we were a buddy of mine had it was some stupid like bet, but it was if I win, you have to use Atom for a week. If I win, if I lose, I have to use Visual Studio Code for a week.
Hmm.
So that was the bet, right? Not particularly high stakes, um, but yeah, but I like it a lot. I just yeah, marketing fail right there.
Well, so I will see. That's where I will disagree because I do think Visual Studio as a full IDE is the best out there, right? And of course, it's been a while since I've used others. But like when I was doing Java development, I hated it because I couldn't use Visual Studio, right? And I'm like, and some of it's just figuring out the differences. But I mean, no one, from what I've seen, no one has really come close to what Visual Studio can do. When you talk about full blown out
Right.
IDEs, right?
The reason I don't like the name specifically is because like if I'm especially in workshops and stuff when I'm trying to teach front end to people specifically who are back end people a lot I still to this day there are a number of people that don't know that there's a difference between the two.
Sure.
So I'll tell them because there's no point in trying to do front end in Visual Studio. It's completely overkill.
Yeah.
And so usually I want to take out the noise and show them the simplicity of the front end and how front end works. Usually it's in the context of either teaching CSS or accessibility to boot. So a lot of times I'll try little to no framework. I've been leaning towards Vue lately for those kind of things, but it's like you don't need a full IDE. This is as simple as it gets. And so I'll tell them open Visual Studio Code, and half the room opens Visual Studio.
Sure.
And
Sure.
so to me, I'm like, well, the fact that there's still even in people that are Microsoft people, simply it's just not, they're not used to, they've never played with it or whatever. That confusion, I still find that it's kind of not cool.
Mm-hmm.
But minor, it's minor in the grand scheme of things. But
of course, and they added confusion. I mean, if you ever watch Microsoft folks, Microsoft employees who do demos, they're switching in between Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code all the time. You never know where they're at,
Yep.
And to the quick eye, you can't really tell the difference, right? I mean, you just see a quick screenshot.
Especially if they're themed the same.
Yeah.
If you've got the same themes on them, yep.
Yeah. So, well, cool. So, let's talk about accessibility, right? One more. Well, actually, before we talk about accessibility, let's talk about your books, which leads into accessibility, right?
Yep.
And I mean, we talked a little bit, Michael, about the books the other night, but let's start. I mean, first, I love the fact your ABC book, which is just awesome, right? And of course, that's more. I think it's more of you that did that than, or at least I think you were more the creative side of that. But
Actually, it was his thing.
oh, really?
Yeah, like obviously the art on it was a lot more my concepts, but we were in that kind of how every now and then in terms of work you've got that lull while everything's boring and it's all repetitive, random, not fun stuff. So we were definitely both in that lull, and I had just been kind of bowing out of the art industry and giving it a big fat middle finger, and the gaming industry, and saying that I was done and moving on with my life. Um, and so what happened is I used to do all the gaming conferences and conventions as, an exhibitor. And I was like, I'm going to go to Origins as an attendee and actually bloody enjoy it and play some games for the first time in forever.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't been to a con that I didn't work in ever and ever. So we go, and in the car, he's just kind of bored, and he's like, "What can I knock out, in 2 hours, 3 hours going to Columbus. And so he decides to pull up the manuscript for that he'd started. I hadn't had any input on it, and got the letters knocked out and got the first pass on the manuscript knocked out in the car on the way to Origins. And so he was actually he's the one that picked all the languages, found all did all the hello worlds for the most part, all of that fun stuff. So
that
I
reminds me.
just make pretties.
Yeah, that reminds me. There's actually a Hello World website that has like Hello World in all kinds of different languages.
That did not exist at the time, and we felt the need to actually run them all, to make sure that they actually ran. So that was a lot of fun too.
Yeah. No, I ran into that site a couple of years ago, because I was doing a talk about how the Microsoft languages had progressed, and I went all the way back to like not Visual Basic, but to Quick Basic, and sure enough, they had an example of Hello World in Quick Basic, and I'm like, oh, that's awesome, right? It's and those I could visually check because I know Basic so well. I was able to visually check. I'm like, yep, that actually would do the job. But yeah, no, it's cool. So of course, so you went from that, and that now you all were silly, and you just had two books in basically a year.
Yeah, never doing that again. Although I say that, but
I was gonna say, so when's the next book coming?
We do not actually have any books in the works right now. Can you imagine?
Because I remember it was Star Trek last year, and you're always, I think your book wasn't even out yet. Like, yeah, we're starting on another book, and I'm like, what?
Yeah, the first one. Well, we weren't done with the first one. That we got the second one lined up, and the first one went out, and we immediately were like, it wasn't even off the presses. We were already starting. We just finished basically the last pass of editing, and we started on the second. And when we started on the second, we had barely written the first half of the first chapter that we actually got asked for a third, by a different publisher. But we talked to them, and they weren't willing to move the timeline. We would have had to write both of them in parallel. And so we said no. We're crazy. We're not that crazy. But yeah, so it was definitely two very much back to back. I don't think I would do it again. Not in that close of proximity. It was a lot of fun, and I greatly enjoyed the process, and I'm very, very glad we did it. I just don't know that I would do them back to back so closely ever again.
And there, for those in the chat, I just linked to Amazon to Martine's books, although it does end up showing other books, but the top three ones are the three books that she and Michael have worked on. Which I'll say, so I have not. I still need to order Architect CSS. I haven't gotten around to ordering that one yet. The approachable accessibility was really good. I like the way how it approached accessibility, right? Again, I thought it was good for not only if you're a developer who's trying to figure it out, but also, like, for me, an architect who needs to understand it on a different level.
Yeah, the accessibility book, the concept behind it is it's really easy to find how-tos, and it's really easy to find cookbooks. And I mean, I have talks. I have an entire talk called Cookbook, right? I mean, that's and those are very, very helpful if you already know what accessibility is, and you already know where you need to be, and you already know kind of like what standards you need to be at, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that whole figuring out how are you going to architect it, how are you going to put it into your code process, because it's never going to be a one and done, right? And what questions do you need to ask in order to even know what in the world you need to be fixing, doing, etc. That part is kind of very, very gray and doesn't have a lot, and so that's why we really focused on that, which means the book is actually pretty good even for your non-coder type, so your managers, your Cs, C-suite. You're like the people that don't necessarily know the tech, because it tells them, you know, oh, I need to talk to the lawyer about X,
Yeah.
right? I need to figure out what we're legally bound to. Maybe I need to, as a leader, say, okay, this is how we're, because accessibility does bring extra work to, development. How are we going to reorganize priorities? How are we not just going to dump this and keep the same timelines? Because
Mhm.
that would not work. Things like that.
No, I really do wish I had that book several years ago. Doing work for DoD. Of course, DoD has said everything has to be, compliant, but they literally just said it had to be compliant. Didn't say to what level or and of course, all my government contacts, they had no, they were like, well, just get it done. We're not going to add any more time to your project. Just get it done. All right. So, but at the same rate, I would, from the same people, I would also get the, oh, well, I need that to be read and to make that signify, or well, we have to put a symbol also. No. I just want it to be read. Like, well, you understand, that not everyone's gonna be able to see that, right?
Oh, when I started, it was even more brilliant because it was also a government project, but the 508 compliance standards
Mm-hmm.
were not actually the same as the WCAG standards. And you could have something, and the 508 standards were so strict in some places but vague in others, that you could have a site that was completely unaccessible, that was completely 508 compliant based on their rules and their cheat sheet. Because like things like the symbols it didn't care about, but you were limited to exactly 5 different typefaces. Like it was like Times New Roman, Comic Sans was on the list, which always made me laugh. But there was like 4 or 5, there was, yeah, 4 or 5 accepted typefaces and nothing else. And there were like, I mean, it was kind of weird, but you could have something completely compliant, and it's still really true today, even with WCAG. If you try hard enough, you can have something that's perfectly compliant and completely unaccessible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's a whole entire can of worms right there between actually trying to make it usable and compliance, right?
But I mean, so have the validation tools got any better? I mean, that was the one problem I was having, was that we tested one tool and said, okay, you're 90% compliant. You test another tool and now we're 65% compliant. I'm like, well, the same code, it's supposedly going against the same standards.
So the tools are a lot more consistent. But a lot of it is because a lot of your tools, so um, like Microsoft published an accessibility plugin, it runs Axe Core. Google published an accessibility tool, it runs Axe Core. So yeah, there's a lot more reliability because they pretty much, your major ones run Axe Core
Mm-hmm.
or Axe. So you're getting more, it's a lot more reliable, but what you're only, the the tools are only going to be so helpful because you're only able to like there's some things that just need human testing. You can generally, or like you can generally say, okay, I've got all my tags written correctly. You can check that as a static code analysis, but you can't exactly check this makes sense per the content. So you could totally have a nav tag that has a list in it. That seems legit. It's even a list of links. That's perfectly legit. It could be completely not a navigation, and the tool would never be able to figure that out,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or alt tags is a good example. It's like you can say this is like the tool would have a very hard time distinguishing from this is a background image, it needs an empty alt tag because it's just there to make pretties, versus this is content and actually needs a description. And is the description even valid, right? So those, and you could use image recognition for that. And some browsers have started inserting alt tags where there aren't any by using image recognition, which is super cool. But it's still not perfect. It's still not what I would consider, like it's better than nothing, but it's not ideal. Um, so you're getting some help there, but there's things that it's never going to be able to, you're never really, other than some really hardcore machine learning, maybe in the future you might get to where you have something a little bit more a little bit more solid on that count, but there's still so much manual testing that, yes, getting 100% on your automated tooling is good, but understanding that that's a starting point is really important, which is what I love about the accessibility plugin by Microsoft. It's called Accessibility Insights. Is that it actually has two levels of testing. It does a fast pass, which is the equivalent of what you're going to get out of Lighthouse, but it also has like the in-depth assessment where it actually walks you through a manual testing and all of the test cases you might have to test for manual testing. So, which is and so the limitations are like it's assuming one page, the page you have up. So you have to understand that now you need to do that on all your pages,
Right.
But it at least very clearly shows this is a fast check. There is a full check that needs to be had on a regular basis, which I find that a lot of the other tools maybe don't do quite as well as really putting in your face. And so but if you're just starting with accessibility, I think that running Lighthouse or running, which is baked into the Chrome browser, you don't even have to download a plugin anymore. It's baked into the DevTools, or running, getting the Microsoft plugin or whatever is definitely a great first step because it does link you to what's wrong, what are the rules, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and like how to fix them. The important bit.
Well, on top of it, I mean, I think you said a great first step, and definitely for the developers be doing that. So, because again, as a director, my whole thought is the cheaper I can do everything, the better, right? So if I can have the developers do those automated tests, so once it gets to the QA, there's less for now they can do their manual testing, but the simple stuff should already be taken care of, right?
Right.
And now they can handle the edge cases and the context. Because honestly, I'm not so sure how good developers are about context. Hey, I just spit on what the database said, right?
Especially in a component-based architecture, it's very easy to be stuck with, I'm dealing with this little component, never mind the fact that there's 7 of them on the page and they all need to like actually make sense together. I'm just dealing with this one little component over here. And so, so it's very easy to like, especially for like header structures, for example, it's very easy to say, well, it's a component. It's my first header. I'm going to stick an H1. Never mind the fact that the page now has 7 H1s. That makes perfect sense. Yay. No, so it's really easy for us to do that. But the other part that I find is also can be interesting is exactly what you were saying about the design of it and like saying, okay, yes, marketing department, this is our brand palette. Those colors are never going to work with the design you want me to make and still be accessible. And so making sure that those conversations are had early, because it's very easy to get a lot of friction between either marketing or design or however that's broken up and development, because it's constantly like your shit won't work. It's like, well, no, we need to like get everybody on the same page. So those are 2 real fun ones to be had. But I've definitely been in that whole situation of you got to make the design pixel perfect to our spec. Well, that's not accessible. We don't care. Make it so. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. And of course, because I've talked to you many times, I know one of your other big beefs is, here's an application, make it look pretty.
Oh, yeah.
And I can admit, I've done that in the past. Here, I wrote this application, make it look pretty, please.
And I use the word, I make the pretties all the time, right? Like, so I'm not helping my case on that, but yeah, there's a lot more to it.
So I mean, let's look at what you're going to be talking at Code PaLOusa, which, number one, I was surprised you didn't beat me up for giving you 3 sessions.
Meh.
Yeah, I almost reached out. I'm like, nah, she'll be all right.
I may have looked up what your full name was. But I figure I would save that one for in person.
So I do have Martine speaking 3 times. in 2 days, right? I mean, so it's funny. Actually, I had Joel Lord yesterday. He's speaking 3 times, but he's doing a workshop and then 2 different sessions.
Yep.
But you, so you know, you speak one day and then you speak twice the other day. But again, you're one of you know, and to all those listening, if you have accessibility talks and UI talks, please submit to Code PaLOUsa.
Otherwise, he's gonna keep doing this kind of crap to me.
Well, you know.
No, I'm actually super excited.
We can always do the Martine, the Martine track. You know, just have a whole track of Martine speaking all day. But you would kill me, and you would probably never talk to me again.
Well, I mean, it's not that much different than running an all-day workshop at that point.
True. Well, it is, except for
every 10 minutes, every like hour instead of every like 2 hours. So it actually probably works out better. Yeah,
except for it's a lot of context switching though. Now you're doing this talk. Now you're going to do this talk. I mean, I gotta admit, I've done it, but I don't mind speaking twice in one day. It really does suck when you're back to back.
Oh, that I don't like. I like having at least one session.
Yeah.
Especially like online, it's a little different because it's not like there's a wait to go, you know, get my coffee, or or I have to go that particularly far. But in person, I really don't. I like having at least one session in between to, you know, get prepped for my next session, review my deck, that sort of stuff.
Well, my big thing, I have to change out my machine, right? Because I talk about so many different things, you know, way how my demos are for one machine are completely different for another, you know, presentation to say. And so, I did that like twice last year, where the topics were completely different, and I had to swap out within 10 minutes, which really just meant I had a whole lot of things open up on the machine for the first presentation because I had everything loaded.
Yeah, I don't do a whole lot of live demos, unless I'm doing a workshop, because I find that, I guess my goal in a talk is to not so much for somebody to be able to walk out and know how to do something, unless I'm poking at something incredibly specific.
Sure.
It's more like, here's the cool stuff it can do. Now go look it up and go tinker. Here's a basic reference on how to start. Like, that's generally kind of my goal. So I do very little in terms of live demos, and especially UI and CSS. I can show the code, show a screenshot of the output, and not have to fight with demos and, you know, me typing in front of people, which automatically like lands with me suddenly forgetting how to type.
Well, oh yeah, definitely.
You know, and all that fun stuff. I find that it's, for me anyway, it's a lot smoother for me just to like show code, show a screenshot, and have people trust that. And I'll link the code, like I'll link to my GitHub at the end to be like, here's where you can find the code. I legitimately wrote this. It actually does run. But yeah, I don't live demo anymore.
Yeah, probably about 2/3 of my talks I do some form of live demo, right? And a lot of it's because I do Azure presentations, right?
Yeah.
So I'm, you know, I am actually showing how you create this, how, you know, the tricks. And I could do the whole trick of recording the thing, so I'm not doing it live. It just is not natural for me. So it's more natural for me to just do it as I'm going through it, which is awesome when Wi-Fi doesn't work with you. But
Yep.
Which is why, I mean, another pro tip: do have PowerPoint slides or whatever slides that have screenshots of everything. That way, if that doesn't work, here's what it should have looked like, right? Because I've done that too before.
Second pro tip: if you're running a workshop and you have like a gazillion megabytes worth of stuff to download off of NPM, have a thumb drive. or whatever the backend equivalent of NPM is. If your NPM install generally takes a good, you know, minute or two at home, it's going to take like 20 minutes on a conference Wi-Fi if it comes down at all.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Or you could have like, you know, what, 7 or 8 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, when Code Mash, when
yes.
GitHub blocked them because they
thought they thought there was an attack. Yep. Yep.
So yeah. So all right. So your talk. So I mean, so first one, you've got architecting for accessibility.
Yep.
So I mean, yeah. So what are we going to see in that kind of talk?
We're gonna go. It's gonna be more like I usually do highly technical talks. This one is probably one of the exceptions. Is I'm gonna go over exactly those things I were talking about earlier. The what sort of questions should you ask as an architect or as a team lead, or if you're just starting on accessibility and don't know where to start. Like it's not. We're gonna probably not gonna dive into any code at all. It's gonna be kind of those. I hate to use the word project management, but it's the kind of those like who do you need to have involved in the conversations? What conversations should you be having? What questions should you be asking? Okay, now you kind of know what you're doing. How do we set that up inside of our dev cycle? What are things we need to be looking for? What are some gotchas, some pay attentions to, et cetera, et cetera. So those kind of that even before you ever put, code, any kind of code or stories inside of if you're doing agile or tasks or whatever inside of your system, what is it you even need to like, what discussions you need to be had and what should you be aware of before you even go down that road. So it's we've decided we were going to do accessibility. Now what?
Yeah.
Right.
What does that
it's
actually
very
mean?
much that point. So
No,
from the very, very beginning.
No, that's cool. I mean, it's definitely something that that we need, right? Because it's easy to say we're going to do accessibility, and it's easy, and it's easy to say, okay, well, so I know, don't just show red, have an indicator. I mean, that's stuff that everyone knows, right? But I mean, from what I'm hearing, this is going to go more into the,
Not everyone.
Well,
I still fight that battle on a regular basis.
But I'm curious. Do you fight that with developers? Or do you fight that with marketing?
It depends. It depends on the client I'm working with at the time. My current clients, what I have a lot of leeway based on what design gives us. If we go back and say, well, yes, I took your design, but I edited it in these ways for these reasons, and I implemented that instead, they're perfectly content with that. So so I've had clients where that worked out really well. So in those cases, I add the icon, and we're done. There's no discussion that needs to be had. It's more on demo because a lot of my clients use Agile, so on demo at the end of the sprint or whatever. Just demo and explain, right, why it doesn't look like the design and everybody's content. Some of the more stricter environment, when a lot of that happens kind of when we're discussing the tasks or whatever upcoming, and it's going to be, okay, I need to see the design, and it's like, okay, this is not going to work, and then it usually gets bounced back to the design team, and then depending on how malleable and understanding and people's and personalities is how much arguing needs to be had.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also been, when I worked in government, no design went through, well, after a couple years of setting everything up to be, to work well with accessibility, designs went through a review process for accessibility before they even went to the developers. So it just depends it depends a lot on the team.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All right, so cool. So then, all right, so the next topic we've got is and I picked this because I know this is something you really want to talk about. So typesetting CSS.
Yeah, that's like typography has always been kind of a fun thing I adore. Simply because I did a lot of calligraphy, and I mean I've always praised for my handwriting anyway. But then I got to web, and it's like, well, this is kind of a mute point. Because who cares that I can write pretty? So I was trying to find ways of taking that typography skill and how would that translate to web, and how does that translate to graphics. And so it turns out CSS has a metric butt ton of things you can do to manipulate text and to manipulate type as a whole. And when you think about the average application, what percentage of what you're looking at is text, right? It's a huge percentage. So there's really a lot of things you can do in terms of design to like clean that up, to make it really smooth, really slick, really accessible. And So yeah, it's just going over all of the CSS that can power that, and all of the different things you can do to, and all of the things that you can, all of the problems you can create also by playing with those properties, depending on what what you do with them. But it's just going through a lot of CSS properties. It's a lot of CSS.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be super fun. I gave that one a couple weeks ago for NDC Oslo, and people seem to really dig it. So
Yeah.
I'm excited.
I'm expecting to see a lot of Cosmic Sands and Papyrus.
Yep, a whole lot of it. And some Windings. You forgot Windings.
Oh yeah, Wingdings. At least Wingdings could have some purpose, right? You know, when you actually use for the individual symbols, but it's
the original icon fonts,
yeah.
right? Now we just use, Font Awesome or Material or whatever, but Windings is the original icon fonts.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, I mean, that's how I used it.
Yeah, well, I saw some people do some really weird things with Wingdings.
It's also convenient when doing ASCII art.
Yeah, I can see that. Definitely. So no, that'd be cool. I mean, so sure enough, I mean the typeface you use is important, right? And I love the advances we've made in like last 10 years or so. I mean, just trying to read code, right? I mean, I'm much older than you are, right? And I remember the days when, well, number one, I remember when it was all Courier, and then we went to Courier New, and it was a big deal, right? But, for the last 10 years, Microsoft and all the others, they've done a lot of research in building fonts. I mean, even just for writing your code, the fonts you use for code is so much cleaner now.
Well, and it's also the difference between how many fonts were developed for paper.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, Times New Roman. Everybody remembers Times New Roman was written for the New York Times, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was meant for paper. It was never created for screen, so it was optimized for paper. So now we're actually getting fonts that are optimized for screen, which is why you're getting a lot better legibility too.
Yeah. Well, but and it's interesting. I mean, if you ever, I mean, I know you get into it, but anyone else you ever get into it, it's interesting to see the distinctions and what you can and cannot do with fonts. I just saw an article the other day, and I was reading through it, and they were talking about, they were talking about the problems with big screens and how it can affect the fonts because of how like Windows will smooth it out for you, but doesn't smooth it out correctly sometimes.
I know nothing about that. I don't use a 40-inch TV as my screen. Nope. And you're right. Some of the fonts are just terrible once you get them on a TV screen or projected or whatever. Some of them are just illegible.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not using TV anymore, but before the monitor I got right now, that's what I was using, and you could definitely tell the difference. I mean, they don't display correctly sometimes. I would have to do. Actually, I found I had to actually make my screens bigger. I just zoom in more, and I didn't like that because I was losing real estate because of that.
Yep.
So that's why I like. Right now, I'm on this big 49-inch curved monitor.
See, I don't know if I could get into curve because so much on code and stuff on a day in and day out, I think I would like it. But as soon as I get into the graphics of it, how does it render straight lines? I don't know if I could. I don't know. I guess when this screen dies, we'll find out.
Well, I mean, I'm not really worried about how straight a straight line is. I don't know. It's sure enough, it's rare that I have something across the whole screen. Right now I've got 4 windows open up across the screen, right? And I still have space, right? I'm still not even using the whole monitor, but it's really nice. I mean, like when I'm writing code, because I'm generally doing side by side, I got a SQL Server open on one window and in my API code in another window, and I mean I've got 2 humongous screens basically. It's basically basically two 25-inch screens sitting next to each other with no bezel in between. You know?
That's why I want for the big TV thing, because then I could have the my code, and I could have my output, and I could have my debug tools, and I could have the chat, and I could have the console, and I could have whatever reference material I'm have open, whether it's the requirements or the design or whatever, open and right. And of course Pandora or YouTube, or pick your poison for the day, or so you need the real estate, and the lines in between weren't working for me.
Well, actually, to go to the ultimate extreme, I have the big 49-inch, but I have two 25 inches on either side.
Yeah, I'm not that bad. I have the big screen, and then I leave my laptop open for because of course having contracting, you have multiple clients, and each of them have their own way of talking to you. So I have Slack, and I have Teams, and I have Skype, and I don't even know. I have Hangouts, and I don't even know what else. But yeah, so you gotta have WhatsApp. That's the other one. But they all have to be open all the time. It's awesome.
Yeah, luckily I don't have to have that many communication clients open up. But I usually have Outlook, Teams, and Slack open at any given point.
Yeah.
And then at time, sometimes I'll have whatchamacallit, Yammer. But that's only because of the MVP program.
I can't, because the client for Teams won't let you be logged into two different accounts. I can't actually have that open at the same time as my client stuff. So client stuff takes priority. But
you're talking about Yammer? Yammer you can have open up along. Yeah.
No, I have the Teams you can't. I was thinking Can-Am.
Yeah, Teams. So I mean, Teams you can switch it, right? I mean, it's annoying. Slack does that better. I mean, that's and the Teams team knows that, right? And I mean, that is one of the things because I've seen some things they're working on that.
Yeah.
At least now, I mean, because it used to be you had to log out and log in. And
yeah, I remember that.
My goodness, that was just horrible. And that's why, I mean, I remember 2 years ago I did a conference and they wanted to use Teams as their communication tool. Which at first I was like, hey, this is awesome. I love Teams, right? I'm in Teams all day long. Except for the only way I could get to it was to log completely out and log back in. I'm like, I don't know, this doesn't work.
It only works because I only have two things that I'm doing on Teams right now, or two accounts for Teams right now. But what I'll do is I'll have one account logged into the web client, and one account logged into the actual desktop client. The downside is the web client keeps on popping up and going, do you want to install Teams? It's like, I already have Teams installed. This is
well, so, and the hack is you can have multiple web clients with different logged in differently.
Yep. You just have Firefox and Chrome, and
well, you can, I think, even in the same browser.
That I have not been able to do, because I was toggling for a while between using Firefox and Chrome to be on different, because it wants you to be logged into your Microsoft account. And so it was messing my ability to get to the Azure stuff and to be able to do PRs and stuff through Azure, because it kept on toggling which account, as soon as I would change, it would log me out of Teams, and it was so I went with two completely different clients.
Well, over probably 6-9 months, they've been making a lot of improvements on that. Because I have that problem. I have, I use 3 different tenants within Azure. Yep. And then on top of subscriptions within those. And it used to be, that's why for the longest time I would have Chrome was what I used for Azure for this tenant. Edge is what I use for this, and Firefox would be what I use for that. And I would just know, okay, I'm going to do work on this, so I'm going to open Firefox, right?
Yep.
But they've actually, especially with Azure, I can be logged in all at the same time, and there's actually a switch. I can just switch between accounts.
That I did see, which is super cool.
Yes, it's very nice. Because again, like I spent so much time in Azure, and I mean, I have 3 different tenants. It's 2 that I'm, it's my regular work account, and then my personal account that I do all my testing on. It's so nice to be able to switch between them and not really think about it.
My 90% of my life is actually spent in Atlassian, so it's a whole different game there anyway. So, and then in terms of my DevOps, I tend to use Firebase a lot. So that's a whole different beast and a whole different. It's a whole different game.
Well, I would say
front end person, click and go. Actually, type command and go.
Well, sure. Now I know you'll say we'll just stop using it, but the one I do have a hard time is OneDrive, because it has a hard time switching between different accounts.
Never used it. Don't plan on using it.
Because there, I have even more tenants. I'm going back and forth between, and there will be times that will be like, yeah, I can't save this. I'm like, why not? I'm logged in. Just save it.
I'm not. Yeah, no. Yep, nope.
I use it because I have it, right? It's already paid for.
I have my Drive. I love my Drive, my Google Drive. It works with, well, and it had, I don't know if OneDrive has it now, but it had, multiple people editing the same documents at the same time in real time, long before OneDrive ever did. Yeah. And so that to me kind of, I'm not going to move everything over, right? It's like, it's there, it's staying there.
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, I haven't edited a Google Doc in a while. I mean, it's been a long time, but Word actually does it really nicely. And what's neat is, like last week I was in a corporate meeting and there were like 6 of us in a document making changes. And you saw the initials of the person as they were typing the stuff, which was really neat to see that.
It's the same way Drive does it, Google Drive does it.
I would assume so. It's funny, we deal with Google Drive a lot because we deal with a lot of education, a lot of schools. Yep. But we as a company, we're an office and all that good stuff. So all right, so then your third talk, which I love the title here. Sprinkle vast greatness into your images.
Yeah, I was trying to find something that worked with SVG that was like, because titles are fun. But no, so that one is basically going to look at. So if you ever open,
I gotta admit, I just now caught that. I didn't even notice it till you just said that.
What? That was the whole point of the corny. That was the entire point of the corny.
I gotta admit, I just now caught that. That's awesome.
But no, the whole point of that one is if you ever open an SVG in a text document or in a code editor or whatever, there's a bunch of numbers there, right? And there's a bunch of stuff there. So it's going to be going what that code means, how to hand code it if you're, wanting to hurt yourself for some reason, or wanting to, do something truly nerdy and geeky all at the same time. So how to hand code them, but more than anything, how you can actually put stuff in there like links and animations and stuff to churn what was a static image into something truly like dynamic and usable. And
I gotta admit, I have been, so this company I'm with now, we use SVGs a lot, and I couldn't believe the stuff that we were able to do with them. All right, and with all the layers and stuff, so like, I mean, again, so we're medical education. So we got things like we're doing layers of the body and everything, and peeling off the layers, and it's all one SVG. And I would have never imagined you could have done that, right? It's just so cool.
I worked on a project once for a client where they were taking blueprints, and their entire program revolved around basically the blueprint being one big ol' SVG, and then being able to annotate and highlight stuff, and it was a lot of fun to work on.
Yeah, no, like I said, I've been, because I mean, when I first saw SVGs, I just thought, okay, it's just a different image format that does it different. I mean, because it's all basically just a text file. Yep. I was like, all right, well, that's novel. that was really my impression of it. I'm like, all right, it's novel. The images tend to be smaller, so that's cool. But like I said, once seeing all that kind of stuff, I don't know about Mac, but one of these days Windows will actually better understand SVGs. Windows still does not know what they are.
Mac is better about it. It just kind of default opens it with a browser.
Yeah,
but then again, I've been using. I don't know if I've trained my machine to do that or if it just naturally does that. But I think it naturally does.
Yeah, and I think that's what Windows does now. I think that's what Windows does now. But that was annoying. I found like an app I could add on that would actually open up into an image, viewer, so I didn't have to open up browsers every time. More importantly, like because I remember it actually allowed it to. I could see the previews inside of Windows Explorer. Because like when I got like a dozen images, I'm trying to figure out which one is which. Opening up a dozen browser tabs sucks, right? Whereas when I can just see it in the Windows Explorer like every other image.
Yeah, I did eventually because I do so much of manual editing of them. I did eventually get a plugin for my IDE so that I can have for Visual Studio Code that previews the SVG, so that if I'm working on an animation or something in there, I can actually see what I'm doing right there in Visual Studio Code, which is nice. But yeah, they're fun. I wish more systems allow you to have them like this particular talk, for example. I'll probably have to use some kind of JS slide library or something, because how many slide deck like PowerPoint and so on don't let you do animated SVGs? Most of them. And it's like, come on, guys. I know I can inject code into your system, but there's ways to serialize that. Come on.
Yeah, that's a good thought. I mean, I wouldn't even know how to do the SVG, so to me that's not a limitation. But I guess and I've become pretty good with PowerPoint of how to do the animations I need to do.
Yeah, but there's a completely different level of animation
you
can do. I mean, you're pretty limited in terms of your shapes and stuff with and the amount of time too. If you're doing a 6 or 7 or 8 step animation in PowerPoint, oh god, versus if and that slide looks like garbage once you're done, because it's got all the layers stacked on top of it and you can't tell what's what, and god forbid you need to edit the text on the box that's all the way at the bottom.
Well, that's one of the tricks is you go to another slide. You just don't let people notice that you're going to another slide.
Yeah. So anyway.
Which is why people sometimes trip out when they see my slides, and an hour long talk, and I have 200 slides, and I'm like, no, don't worry about it, right? There's like 8 slides that are really all one slide, right? But in PowerPoint it's 8, right? Or when I can do an image correctly, because you eventually get, well, there's a couple things. One, because like what you're talking about, you get so much overlaid, it's hard to manage. The other is also when I try to export to PDF, the transitions do not work at all.
Yep.
Right, and so I'm curious, how well does that work with an SVG? Is it just show the end state, I guess?
Beginning state or end state, depending. So if it's whatever state it's currently in when it takes the image for the export. So very similarly to if you were trying to do a screen grab, right? It depends on what state you're in.
Mm-hmm.
Generally speaking, you're either going to get the beginning or the end state. Anything in between kind of is fair game at that point. But a lot of times the way at least I end up using SVGs are either interactive. Think of your infographics, right? Being
Mm-hmm.
able to have those be interactive or clickable or get you to more data, or they're little transitional things like your micro animation type stuff. Being able to flip an arrow on hover, being able to I don't know, the loaders, right? Who cares? Right? So I generally, they're not things. If I care enough that the data needs to be printed, if somebody prints it, it's probably not going to be like something that I would do. Even if it's an SVG, like the animation's not going to be related to that because it's important enough for it to be on the screen anyway, right? So that's kind of or it's a multi-step something where you're clicking through, in which case it's irrelevant. So my thought, if it's important enough that it needs to be on print, then there's something else going on that needs where the animation shouldn't be continually doing that, because you want to be able for your users to be able to stop the animation for more time reading, interruptions, whatever. So if it's content related, it's probably not going to be. I use them a lot more for, like, again, interactive, like response interaction and or loaders than for making like movement inside of the actual content, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense.
And I don't want to make my users seasick, because I have you ever seen those sites where the background's like you're trying to read something and the background's doing all sorts of weird things and like flipping, and it's like, no, please, how do I make it stop? And usually the only way to make it stop is to open DevTools and be like, delete that GIF or delete whatever that is. That's, make that stop. It's like, no, don't make people do that. That's
admittedly, I excuse me. I've definitely learned the don't put too many animations in your slides, right? But there are definitely good uses. Just like everything, there's a good use for it, but it's also very easy to overuse.
Oh yeah.
And I find a lot of speakers who are not new, who've been doing it for a little bit of time, but now they're starting to learn more about like PowerPoint or Google Slides or what have you. Ooh, let's add these to make my slides look better, right? And you end up just polluting the slides, and or like I said, I've learned to have multiple slides to show that to do the transition, so that when you export it out to PDF, it still comes up something, because someone in that session is going to ask for this copy of the slides. It is invariably going to happen.
Yep.
And I know people who no, they're not available. You can watch the video or whatever, but I like making mine available because, I'm not that special that I'm worried about someone, although now with that being said, there's always, Phil Japisky, he's got the story of how someone took his slides, put them on Udemy, didn't even bother to take his name off the slides.
My guess is they just either they didn't know, they didn't care, or they just figured that nobody would ever notice or say anything.
I think they just didn't even pay attention. I think they just tried to make literally tried to shortcut so much, didn't even bother to notice.
Well, how many?
And plus, the top of it was schematic, right? It wasn't his name. It was it was his brand, right? Right. And I guess they just maybe that's some company, or who knows what they were thinking.
Well, how many? At one point in my career, not being able to find a job, I got a little desperate and took a job in the elementary school system. Which, if for those who know me, know how desperate I must have been. 'Cause I love kids, but yeah, no, job was not for me. But the number of times we get kids, you knew they'd copied the answer from the kid beside them because they'd even copied the name.
Right.
Like, just saying. It's just the adult version of that, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like, that was probably the kid going around copying his neighbor's name off his paper when they were in elementary school, is all I've got to say.
No. So
the fun part with animations, though, is the whole GIF thing that came about. I don't know, it feels like it's been around kind of more recently than, we're talking years recently, not months, but the whole slide decks that are basically 100 bazillion GIFs.
Goodness.
And I'm just like, I can't concentrate on you talking because there's kittens doing weird things behind you, and now I have no clue what you're talking about. Have you seen those?
I have, yeah, and I don't know, it's interesting. I know some people, their slides have actually nothing to do with the talks. They're just really there for pictures. For them, it's visual clues of what they want to talk about. But to me, that's a little bit distracting because I'm used to looking at the screen because I want to see that. So I personally, I don't like that. But
I'm split. If it's even remotely relevant to what they're talking about,
well, sure.
Not having text and having just imagery is nice, because then people, even if they're looking at the image, they're not trying to read what's on the screen. They're actually listening to what you're saying. So that works.
No, I definitely agree there, because I've been working on putting more and more images I try to, I mean, I have subscriptions to like Adobe Stock and stuff, so I'm looking for images that match what I'm talking about. And I do that more and more, especially with my non-code talks. All right, because your non-code talks, like when I talk about leadership and stuff, it is so easy to have death by bullet point. All right, I mean, because it's just natural at that point.
My accessibility one is going to be kind of hard because I'm so used to writing code talks, like hardcore code talks, that it's going to be like, well, I don't have code. I don't want to do death by bullet points. So yeah, that's going to be fun.
That's why I do a talk about leadership, and I use the Marine Corps leadership principles as the basis for the talk. And what I got lucky is the Marine Corps actually published a website that had these wonderful images that actually showed each of the principles, and I use that. I just shoot straight up, and I say these are from the Marine Corps website, and the only words are like the title of the trait, right? Because to emphasize what we're talking about. Oh, that's just reminding people to register. I see you seeing the text coming up there, but yes, please do register for Code PaLOusa.
It'll be awesome.
Yes.
I'm excited.
But so I'm curious. Start wrapping up here. But how's everything been with you and the family as far as the pandemic and everything?
Well, we got a crash course on at-home schooling.
Mm-hmm.
We're actually looking into options for next year because, to my great dismay, a lot of the at-schooling options ordered by our district basically are doing the bare minimum, which means reading, writing for at least the smaller kids. Like the high school, they have their classes, whatever, but the smaller kids, it's reading, writing, math, and they've cut out all social studies, all science, all music, all arts. And I'm like, yeah, that was barely okay for the however many weeks at the end of the year that they had to do that. I'm not doing another, because who knows what's going to happen, right? And with the the upticks and the downticks and the upticks and downticks, it's a little unpredictable in my opinion, and it's not looking great in a lot of places. So we're kind of looking at options to figure out should we be going for an an online school um, that's so that they do get all of the humanities and all of the history and all of the science that our districts doesn't seem to find important, which yeah, I find that those topics, especially in this current era, are incredibly important for for the kids to live and to learn. So
well, true, except for as we're all learning that the history we learned wasn't maybe right.
Yeah, there is that. So but yeah, so it's been interesting. So we have the luxury of both Mike and I work from home, so it was like for having the kids at home, it's not like it caused any childcare concerns. However, it's like trying to teach the kids while we're working. Well, it did change um a lot of things, and in the way we operated at home, in terms of, okay, during these times you're working independently, during these times which is not anything we've ever had to do. Like, so it's been a little different. We actually invested in little lights that glow red when we're on calls, so that it's like, right now, go away, leave me alone. Yeah, unless you're bleeding or it's on fire, I don't want to know. Right? Like, them be your exceptions. It's like, basically, if 911 is not warranted, I don't want to know. But no, so it's been, in a lot of ways, it hasn't changed anything about, I mean, the travel's done. We used to, so that was unfortunate. But in the day in and day out, outside of travel being canned and everybody being home 24/7, not a whole lot has changed for us. Unfortunately, like, that education bit is pretty big, and so it's going to be figuring out, you know, making sure that we are making time available, because it's no longer like I'm shipping them off for 8 hours a day or however long school lasts, and I have that dedicated head to down time that no longer exists. So it's a little it's a little interesting, and we're definitely going to have to, as long as this continues, weigh priorities and weigh how much of projects like books we take on, because we're going to be spending more time in terms of having to, educate and spend time with them, and not just replace ourselves with screens or whatever other parenting hacks we've had to come up with. On the upside, they now both know how to cook.
What?
You know.
It's funny. My daughter says she knows how to cook, but I never see her cook. Well, I see her cooking for herself. I never see her cook for the rest of us. I'm like, she keeps telling us that she's a good cook, and I'm waiting to see that. I need a reminder of that again.
Our little one cooks for himself, and still needs a little bit of. I mean, he just turned 9, so he's still um, needs a little oversight. Like I can hear and see the kitchen from my office, so like if he wants to make cookies, I'll totally let him, but I can hear if there's any major malfunction,
Right,
or I
right.
can smell if stuff starts burning, like that kind of. The older one, I don't, she's 15, she'll regularly cook for us too. It's like, oh, you guys haven't even started yet, I'm starving, I'll just make dinner. I'm like, cool.
I wish that was the case. And of course, mine's 23, right? So she doesn't have much of an excuse.
Yeah, yeah. But mine,
And
mine enjoy it though. I think part of it, especially is with the quarantine, and we limit screen time at home. It gave them something to do,
yeah,
like and something to be proud of, and something to experiment with. Because fine, if it doesn't taste good, or if it's a complete flop, it's a complete flop.
yeah.
I mean, we'll pull out some sandwiches and call it a day, right? Like, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah. No,
So.
I mean, sure. I mean, my daughter, she enjoys baking, so she'll bake stuff, and I'm like, okay, that's great. I want dinner though.
Yeah, that's gonna be the death of me, I think, in quarantine. It's like I don't think my waistline can handle the baked goods that are flowing through my household. Not for any length of time, anyway. It's like Christmas in July.
Right? No, exactly. Yeah, but we got cupcakes sitting right outside, and of course, I mean, they're extremely decadent. I'm like, oh my goodness, that's just too much.
Right now we have oatmeal cookies, and I think there's a crumble in the making. So, because we got a couple pounds of blueberries the other day, so the there's it's the kids aunt, godmother, whatever we want to call her, took them to go picking blueberries, and they came to the blueberry picking field thing.
Mhm.
It was nice. It was out in the middle of the nowhere, nice and isolated, but they came back with pounds and pounds and pounds of blueberries. So now I need to find things to do with the pounds and pounds and pounds of blueberries.
Well,
Not complaining.
for those who don't know, I mean, Indiana has some really good blueberry areas.
Yep.
So actually, a lot of different fruits. Blueberry is one of the things that definitely grows quite well in Indiana.
I'm pretty sure the kids are talking about trying to take one or the two of the blueberries and plant them to see if they'll grow. I'm like, give it a shot. Worst case, I have a pot of dirt in my kitchen for a couple weeks until you give up on it. Best case, I get a blueberry bush.
We say actually, my daughter, my wife has actually she's been planting more and more stuff this year. We have all kinds of plants throughout the yard. We need we talked about for next year. We're going to do it better because right now, literally, it's here's a tomato plant over here is like some pepper plants over there is that. Next year we actually need to build an actual garden, right? And
we had a garden for a while, and then we kind of let it go to garbage, and we grew a lot of weeds, and not the cool kind either,
right.
like the dandelion kind, and
Mm-hmm.
the like um and so this year we actually revamped it and have some zucchinis and squash, some tomatoes, some green beans. The kids wanted to try beets, so we're trying beets, and then some herbs. So nothing super fancy, but all the easy stuff
Mm-hmm.
basically. But it's been a lot of fun.
That's cool.
And again, something to do.
Oh yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and get this wrapped up because I mean we're getting on to 1 o'clock and.
Sounds good.
I'm sure both of us need to get back to work.
Yeah, I'm smelling food too, and we've been talking about food, so there might have to be an intermission between me going back to work and.
I feel the same way because I have not eaten yet today. I just actually we didn't have any milk, so I didn't have any cereal this morning. So I just started working. Although I mean, sure enough, talking about we're having really good ribeye steaks tonight, so I'm really looking forward to that. And sure enough, I mean, I cook them more French style, so lots of butter and
That's how to do it.
really good crust on them. Yeah, it's
butter's the secret to make anything taste good.
yes. No, I love hanging out with you because I don't have to worry about how much butter I eat because I never eat as much as you do.
Hey, it's the 3 secrets of French cuisine is butter, butter, and butter. And when in doubt, butter.
Exactly.
And not the fake shit either, like the real legit butter.
Yeah.
Not the margarine, not the I can't believe, not the whatever other like smart balance, whatever like oil, but butter.
Yeah, well, I gotta admit, like when we're having bread, I'll use like the spreads and stuff because it's more convenient. But for cooking, I use real butter.
It has a different melting point too. So a lot of the baking, it's at least if you're trying to make like fancy schmancy pastries or something, since the melting point is different. Like unfortunately, one of my nephews is lactose allergic to anything lactose based. Like not even intolerant, like flat out allergic, EpiPen type. So we had to make the Christmas cookies this year, like with fake butter, which was fine. I could concede to that. You have a legit reason. I will concede to making it without the real butter. But I found out the hard way that because the melting point is different in terms of the texture, I had some issues with some of them. It was like, oh, I don't know. So butter's still better.
Oh yeah. Awesome. Well, again, it's been great having you today. And again, thank you for not killing me for scheduling for 3 docs in 2 days.
You're welcome. I enjoy it.
No, I only did it because I knew you actually wouldn't mind.
Yeah.
Right. But obviously, I really appreciate you joining me for the last hour and a half. It's been great catch. As I've been telling, I mean, the great part about these interviews, I'm getting to talk to people I haven't talked to in a while. I mean,
yeah.
It's been quite a while since I've seen you.
Last conference. I don't even know.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even remember because you weren't at CodeMaster because you were in Antarctica, which I kind of wish I did that.
It was awesome.
Yeah, I really did think about doing it, but yeah, it just really wasn't in the budget.
Especially with the pandemic now, I'm really glad we made the trip because it was like we got a nice long trip, went home to basically be in lockdown a week later, but it meant that we at least got that much.
Yeah.
So that was
like I mean, like so one of the things I'm not regretting. One of the things I'm disappointed was like I was going to speak at the European Cloud Conference, and they just postponed that again today. So now it's October 2021.
Yep.
Although the interesting part is I still will be doing my workshop online now, though.
Interesting.
On French time.
Awesome. A lot of the NDCs are doing that. Like I noticed Minnesota is like basically reopening the CFP for workshops, and Melbourne was all workshops. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, I need to submit for Minnesota.
Oh, yeah, I need to resubmit as well.
I probably won't get in, but that's okay. It's.
But yeah, if I had actually gotten to travel this year, I would have been Oslo and Melbourne and KC. I mean, assuming I'm assuming I'd made it in KC, right. Louisville. I think everything else is in the U.S., but that would have been my.
I would say right now we're supposed to be in Kansas City right now.
Yeah, I know. I saw that on my calendar. I never removed it from my calendar, so it kind of made me sad when I saw that pop up. It's like, you're supposed to be in KC. I'm like, maybe?
Yeah, John posted something yesterday because his calendar still showed. Yeah. And he's like, well, I guess there's a couple wasted days.
Yeah. I am kind of glad that they, there's something to be said about online conferences, but I'm kind of glad that they didn't go online because I don't think it would have had the same vibe.
So yeah, so it's a hard decision. I mean, you know, and I mean, we debated it really hard as to what to do. I know and Lee was the big one about it. He was like, it's just not going to be the same thing. And you know, I'm pretty sure if I remember right, he basically said he wasn't going to be a part of it if they were going to do it online. Wow. Because he was like, it's just not going to be the same thing, right? And not be a part of it. He would have been there, but you know, but and I say all three. There's really four of them. You know, everyone always forgets about and I'm even drawing like a name right now. Boone, yeah. But the three that everyone knows about, right? I mean, they talked very, very vocally about it. You know, and they were just like, well, even if we could have in person, you know, it's going to be what, a couple hundred people are going to actually show up. You know, so it's not going to be the same vibe. Yep. And so, you know, at Code PaLOusa, we thought about long. Now, I found a platform that looks like it'll be able to mimic a lot of it. You know, so there's still, you know, it's more of a speed dating type system, but I mean, there's going to be networking. And then we're going to have open spaces. So I'm hoping that will still give a lot of the feel of a conference. I don't know. I mean, we'll see, right?
For me, I think Code PaLOusa, I get don't get me wrong, I get a lot out of the networking and the hallway track, but I tend to attend a lot more sessions at Code PaLOusa than I probably do other conferences. And I don't know if it's just the type or if it's because historically it's been a different time of year and the talks are not talks that I'd already seen somewhere else, or I don't know what it is, but I tend to, so for me, Code PaLOusa going online didn't bother me near as much as some of the others. It's like, yes, I'm going to miss Louisville. I'm going to miss the bourbon. I'm going to miss seeing everybody. Like, that's not going to change. But like, get to attending the talks. I can attend the talks from my couch and my PJs instead of, you know, having to get up and get dressed. Okay, that's kind of cool. You know, that's kind of cool. So I don't know. So for me, I think it, like, my personal opinion based on whether a conference should go online or not is more based on how my general, like, how I generally approach that specific conference more than it is the specific vibe of a conference, I guess.
Yeah, no, I get that. And sure, I mean, the biggest reason why we decided to go online was I saw so many other conferences canceling. And I was hearing from folks, it's like, well, are we not going to get to go to anything this year? And sure enough, the bigger ones, the NDCs, and you know, I mean, honestly, the for-profit ones. I mean, they've gone online, but they have more power to do stuff like that. You know, the community ones, you know, it's a little bit harder.
Well, yeah, because they've got usually speaking, the NDCs have a lot bigger budget to play with, right? And so now they're not having to schedule venues. So, I mean, I think I don't know if they changed their ticket price or not, but like there's a lot of, you're shifting costs from one place to another. It's a little different. I don't know if what kind of penalties they got on, you know, canceling venues either. So
yeah, I obviously don't know. I know for us, we got, we had a force majeure, so you know that played in. Cool. It also helped. Actually, we're going to do a command center at the Hyatt, so I'll have like about a dozen people that'll be there in one big conference room. You know, so we can, you know, that way if there's problems during the day, you know, we're all there. You know, we're not having to try to do a Skype chat to figure out what's going on, right? We can, you know, but so that, I mean, that did help when I say, hey, we're obviously not going to be able to have a 500 person or more event, right? That's not going to happen. No. I mean, supposedly tomorrow in Kentucky we can have events of up to 50 people.
That's still like, there's still a zero shy there.
Yes.
Like, at least.
Well, and zero shy was a low number. I mean, you know, last year we were 800 people.
Right.
And we were expected to be 900 to 1,000 people this year. You know, coming in this year, that's what we thought. But and admittedly, I kind of wish the state would say, why don't we delay that a couple more weeks before we, because I mean, we're seeing all over the country, you know, more of an uptick.
Yeah.
Luckily, so far, not so much in Kentucky. But yeah, I'm like, let's make sure we don't see that in Kentucky.
I think tomorrow or the day after, Indiana is supposed to go to phase 4 or whatever, and we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, I think
I'm not sold.
Yeah, I think this is like phase 3 for us here in Kentucky.
Yeah.
That is the other weird part, Kentucky's got much more stricter than Indiana, and which makes it really weird when you live on the border. Because you could do a whole lot more things right across the river, than you can right here in the city, which has made it a little bit interesting.
I'm sure that's gotten some people a tad bit upset.
I actually think most of the Southern Indiana stuff just followed the Kentucky rules, just because it just made more sense. It like the restaurants. I think a lot of restaurants waited to open up until the Kentucky ones open up, because they probably weren't gonna get much business, because probably most everyone in the region will think, oh, what's the same as Louisville.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
But
I'm still concerned. Like, I'm still hunkering down.
Yeah, I'm not hunkering down as much as I should, but I am. Mostly because I just gotta get out of the house at some point. But
we've been doing things like going to, the kids went to the blueberry patch, right?
mm-hmm.
But we've been very specifically picking things that are incredibly low contact with other people. Trying to find some I think in next couple weeks should be chanterelle season starting up. We'll probably go find some trails in the middle of nowhere, right? Like those kinds of things that are like, they're not complete quarantine, but they're also very much staying away from people.
Yeah.
In no way, shape, or form are we going to go to, go play laser tag or whatever, is something, or go to the mall or something.
I have been to the mall several times.
So that's kind of how we're playing it. Doing some random. We did succumb to the home makeover thing, so we did some stuff in the yard, and we did some. We recently acquired a clarinet that was sitting in an uninsulated attic for over 20 years. So we're redoing that because I can order all the parts online, and I guess the family gets to learn how to repad an instrument, right? So we've been doing those sorts of things that are like, do what you can, right?
Oh yeah.
We're trying to stay home as much as possible and do as much online as possible. Just between just keep our own butts safe and figure not extenuate the problem. Try to be part of the solution.
Oh yeah, definitely agree. That's why because my trip to France got canceled. Now I'm trying to because that was about the only break I was going to have for the rest of the year. So now I'm trying to think of somewhere, because I would like to get away. So I mean, I've been looking at like maybe renting a house or a cabin somewhere, just so I can get away from the house for a couple days.
Yep. We've toyed with the idea of camping, like, because my brother has a camper, and so we've toyed with that idea. We're not sure, but
yeah, that definitely wouldn't fly in my family. As it is, I talk about let's get a cabin like in like the mountains, and my wife's like, that's so boring, Well, yeah, that's kind of the point.
We also have a state park not very far from where we live, probably about 2-hour drive,
mm-hmm.
that has a huge lake in the peninsula, and like the only way to really do your choices are basically a day hike or a canoe to get to said peninsula. So the and the hike is not an easy one. A couple of my friends and I did it. We did a girls backpacking trip and went and did it, and it is not an easy hike because we camped, and it's down, in, and up, out for starters. And so we backpacked and stayed a weekend and backpacked out, and it was tough. And I'm like, there's no way the kids are making that hike, and no way in hell. So, but we've thought about the ideas of renting a couple canoes or something, and then going to camp on the peninsula, because you're out in the middle of nowhere. Like, yeah, there's no anonymous, but I didn't, I have a water filter and I have a shovel, so we're good. you know, and I have a tent. Lug everything in the canoes and go, right? So we've thought about those kind of things, but I figured from knowing you, I don't think that would fly with your family.
Yeah, no, especially my daughter.
But
She's definitely a girly girl, and there's no question about that, right?
oh, my daughter would totally like wear makeup to do this. Like there's no. She's the makeup and combat boot type, so we'll see.
Well, my daughter does have a pair of combat boots, but that's because that was what was in fashion over the winter.
Ah, yes, yes.
You know, and I love that your daughter's trying to get on the camera real quick there.
Nice. Yeah.
But but of course those were patent leather shined and but apparently that was the thing during the winter in Boston. It was
Okay.
was boots like that.
I wouldn't know.
I mean, well, actually, she traded in the patent leather to get regular leather because she didn't like she was like, apparently that wasn't the style, but then it was to shine them. And I was like, well, look, I'll teach you how to really shine boots, right? Cause in Marine Corps, we were taught how to shine these the correct way, right? And she's like, oh, that's too much work. I'll just put this shine on them. All right, no problem.
Nice.
All right. Well, like I said, it's been awesome talking to you. And I'll definitely. I know I will be talking to you at some point in August through all that. And so awesome. I'll talk to you.